Ideas for Impact, a new podcast where innovation meets sustainability head on. Let's take a fresh look at how we do business. Changemakers are innovating solutions to some of the toughest challenges we face in our world. In the process, they are creating their own mark on industry. Our guests are rebels with a cause. They are tearing down barriers, redefining success, and leaving a mark on their industries. Our guests are the disruptors who refuse to settle for business as usual. Join us to unravel the lessons learned behind their failures and their triumphs and uncover the hidden opportunities for positive change. Co-hosted by me, Joanna Buczkowska-McCumber, and my friend, Deborah Host. Welcome to Ideas for Impact, the show where we take a fresh look at how we do business in this world. We'll be chatting with changemakers who are part of disrupting industries with innovative ideas on what sustainability can look like and mean. On this podcast, we want to showcase the disruptors, the visionaries, the wild ones who are changing the game. Everything from food to consumer packaged goods to finance to Web3 to big climate tech. We're going to be featuring guests who are shaking things up.
Hey, everyone. I am the co-host, Deborah Houst, coming at you from Austin, Texas.
Hi, Deborah. And this is Joanna. I am the co-host as well, Joanna Buczkowska-McCumber, and I'm joining you from Victoria, BC.
All right, Joe, let's start with the name of our show, Ideas for Impact. This obviously has come from you and the business that you've started and are running. But why don't you just tell me a little bit more and tell our listeners a bit more about where Ideas for Impact came from?
Sounds good. So Ideas for Impact, obviously the name of the podcast, but also the name of my business, which is called Ideas for Impact Sustainability Agency. And at the agency, we work with businesses and organizations to really help them prepare for the new climate future. And what that means is that we're always exploring and thinking about how we can tangibly weave in social purpose and sustainability right into the core of every business that we work with and hopefully will work with in the future. What we believe is that, and what I believe is that in order for us to be able to meet the demands and the challenges of climate change that is presented to us on a year-to-year basis, we need to be thinking about sustainability all the time and weaving it into our organizations. Now, how did this get started? How did I get here? I've got a long history of working at this really interesting nexus of sustainability, strategy, and entrepreneurship. And really thinking about how do we bring all these ideas to fruition and then actually into creating impact. And between that, you need action, you need implementation. And I have worked with many entrepreneurs and innovators over the last 15 years in the Canadian startup ecosystem. And more specifically, that experience comes from actually building a couple different accelerators and incubators in the ecosystem. One of them being the iHub at the University of British Columbia.
Where we met.
Oh my God, so many
Yes.
years ago, where you met, where you brought in your business. You were one of the entrepreneurs in that program. So lucky to have met you. And another great example of like just how many incredible, entrepreneurs and innovators are out there trying to solve all sorts of big societal environmental challenges. Another accelerator that I built out and ran for quite a bit of time was called League of Innovators for young entrepreneurs across Canada under the age of 30. And then the most recent is called W Venture, which is women-focused accelerator here in Canada to help women entrepreneurs scale their businesses. And so through all of that work, I really got inspired to not only help entrepreneurs scale their businesses, but figure out how do we scale businesses that make impact. And that was sort of really one of the big jumping off points or leaps of faith for me when I started Ideas for Impact is, how do we really focus on bridging this gap between building a business that grows and is successful from a profitability and a revenue perspective, but at the same time is also successful from an impact creation perspective. And so really trying to weave these things together, knowing that they're actually really intimately tied, right? If we grow revenue and we scale our business, if our goal is to make impact in the world, then if we grow, that impact grows as well. And that's so encouraging and exciting. And in my work, I work with lots of different clients, yes, in the startup world now, investment, but also with larger companies that are trying to innovate from a sustainability and social purpose perspective. And really the common thread which I find really encouraging, is the fact that whether you're an entrepreneur, you're an investor, or you work in a larger teleco, for instance, you can make impact, you can innovate, and you can create solutions to these challenges that exist out there in the world, as long as you're really thinking about what is that positive impact that I can create and how can I disrupt what we're doing, knowing that we don't have to do what has been done for generations or for decades. We can actually innovate, and that will ultimately create the change that we're seeking in the world. And so that is a bit about me and my thought
Yeah.
process of how we really got here, and like thinking about, okay, let's talk more about this. Let's bring amazing people onto this podcast that are entrepreneurs, that are innovators, that are leaders, that are change makers, and really dig deep into how they're thinking about solving some of these big issues that they're trying to solve.
It's interesting that you bring up the word impact, because I think when I got into all of this, it was by default. Like, it was just, I saw something that I actually wanted, which was a headband. And bear with me for this
Yeah.
story. But I saw a headband. I was traveling in South America. I was in Bolivia. And at the time, I was with my boyfriend, who's now my husband, Lee. And I saw this headband and I was like, I want that headband. That's a really cool headband. And it was a headband that had copper inside of it. So it stayed on your head, and it was using this sort of like traditional fabric. And it kind of looked a little bit like thick and wide, almost like turban-esque in style. And it just, to me, like caught my eye. Then I met some women who, they were working at the time when I met them at this small stand on the street. And one of them was sewing. And I said, hey, like, since you know how to sew, if I get this fabric and this copper, can you make me this headband? She was like, yes, of course. After discussion, conversation, ends up that she had a loan, a microfinance loan that she had taken out through an organization called Pro Mujer. And she needed to pay back this loan, and she was working to do that. And I thought, well, could we create more of the product that I want, bring it to North America, sell it for way more, get the money back to her, teach her some other skills along the way, like email, because if I'm in, at the time we were living in Toronto, traveling obviously in South America, but if I'm in Toronto trying to sell it up there, I need a way to get in touch with her. So we had to create a few systems along the way. And all in all, it was a small business that had impact. But at the time, I didn't think about the impact. I just thought about the product. I thought about the need. I thought about all of the stuff in between, and I just did it. And what that taught me, more than there's a problem and we have to find a way to solve it, is that there's an opportunity for everyone to have a place in this space of what we're calling impact and sustainability. And what I would love is for you to kind of share what impact really means, because for so many, it can mean very different things. So for you, this idea of impact and sustainability, and even having a business called Ideas for Impact, like what kind of impact are you really trying to have?
It's a great question. And like a great thought around, what is impact? Because impact can be both negative and positive, right? And so the way that I really think about impact through my business is, how do we work with companies and maybe funds and organizations and other type of entities to give them the tools and activate those tools within their business, within their product, within their teams, so that they can actually execute on sustainability in their own unique ways. And be resilient businesses, be driven by a bigger purpose than just profitability, knowing that no matter what, they're going to have an impact in the world. And so tying their impact to something that's positive, I believe, is really, really important. And of course, like having worked across these ecosystems of different types of entrepreneurial endeavors, from like oceans to CPG products to climate tech to clean tech to you name it, impact can look different. You can have operational impact as an organization in terms of like what your footprint is and how the type environmental footprint, social footprint, community footprint. But you also can have a footprint, an impact footprint from a product or services perspective. And so that differs depending on what kind of business you have, what kind of product you're trying to build. I agree, it is different for everyone, and it is unique to your business and to the purpose that you have in this world with your business or your fund or your organization. And I think that's a fluid piece that everyone has to figure out for themselves. I think there's a big narrative in the world that we all have to abide to like one standard. And sure, standards are great because they help us at least benchmark our work, be able to compare across an ecosystem or a global environment. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that everybody's experience is going to be different and their impact is going to be different. And that is an important piece.
Doesn't have to be big. I think that
No,
was a really,
yeah,
right?
exactly. And because like everyone has an impact. That's my thing. It's like you're going to have an impact whether you like it or not, right? You're building a business, you're either delivering services, or you're manufacturing product. That is inevitably going to have an impact, a trickle down effect, some in the community, on a supply chain, on an environmental footprint, you name it. It can look very different. It can be small and it can be very large. And so the most important thing for you as a business or organization or somebody working in a business, you have to figure out what that is for you. And being aware and having the agency over that information is the first starting point of like figuring out what impact means to you and how you can actually work with it. And
Yeah.
for you too, Deborah, like, you mentioned like your first business, but that certainly wasn't like the last business that was focused on impact that you created. Maybe share with the audience too, like the other businesses that you've worked on and that you started.
Sure. I think it was a really great stepping stone, the business that was started in Bolivia and brought back to North America, entering into the world of social entrepreneurship. And that led me to realize that any challenge that our globe was facing was a problem that had a solution or had solutions, and I could be part of those solutions through business. I've worked with trying to solve ocean conservation by working on projects like land-based salmon aquaculture in Miami and Denmark. I've worked with job training, job creation in East Baltimore by helping a larger nonprofit create a profitable business that hired men and women who were formerly incarcerated and giving them an opportunity or a second, third, fourth, whatever chance was required to allow everybody an opportunity to gain some real skills that could be used in the workforce to get themselves ahead. I'm currently working with an NGO, helping them promote Indigenous owned enterprise by coming up with ways to fund these enterprises and learning a lot more about the circular economy by doing so. And I think I never had an issue with finding work that had a positive social or environmental impact. What I've had an issue with, and maybe you've had the same thing, is recognizing what one person can achieve and trying to stay in my lane and trying to give myself a period of focus on just that one thing. Because once you get into this, it's really easy to just say, okay, well, like, let's solve this and then let's move on and solve this and then let's keep going, because it's addictive in the sense that you're trying to make a positive change. You're trying to leave a better footprint behind. And for me, that's like why I love this work and why I'm so excited to be part of this podcast. And I think we've talked about this, and just in terms of the guests we want to bring on the show, we want to make sure that we're thinking a little bit outside the box with the change makers who come on here, because to be a change maker doesn't necessarily mean you have to have your own business. You could be doing something on the side. It could be a volunteer, it could be community work, but it could also be that you're working on solving a problem that hasn't really been solved yet. And however you do that is however you do that. And we want to hear from you.
Definitely. It's such a great point too. Like we put in our society so much pressure on one person or one entity to solve a problem maybe that exists out there. But the reality is like not one company, not one individual can be responsible for fixing the world, if you will, right? Like fixing the challenges that we face. Those challenges are so many and so complex and growing in scale and complexity, we need a lot of people to be thinking about these issues and figuring out how they can contribute from their unique perspective or point of view. And I think that's a big thing too, in recognizing that innovation can stem from many different places, and entrepreneurship is definitely one of a big space that innovation can come out of, that can be really disruptive and really change the pathway in an industry, or like what's accessible to humanity, right? Like we look at, of course, like the internet, we look at things like Facebook, we look at things like Google, and now AI, like what role they have had and will continue to have in changing the way we look at the world and that we function in the world. But I think for the most part, this path requires many people to put their heads together and do the work to really have real impact or tangible impact in the world.
And to do the work, so AI wasn't really as much of a thing a decade ago as it is today. I feel like innovation comes from how we can utilize current tools and technologies that we have to rebuild and rethink our social and environmental needs. Like, how can we use AI to better situate ourselves in the future as it pertains to climate? And you know a few examples of companies that are really trying to tackle that one problem and potential solutions. And it's just like, okay, well, let's dig into that further. And that's where it comes back to like just staying true to the social and environmental goal can take a hit if the bottom line isn't producing a profit. And we have talked about this at length, because sometimes when you hear the word sustainability, ESG, impact, it oftentimes feels like you're not going to necessarily hear the word profit or business or success at the same time. But that's not true. You have an entire business based around the fact that that's just simply not true.
Definitely. And I think over the last decade, most certainly we've seen this like better understanding and acceptance of the fact that we can do good and create profit, and that businesses need to really adopt a lot of this sustainability principles. We've got the whole emergence of ESG and ESG compliance and reporting. And although some, it's a politicized issue and a lot of people have their own opinions about it, what it makes everybody do is think about sustainability from a holistic perspective in their business. And that's a good thing, right? The big thing is too that so many innovators and entrepreneurs that I've seen build out their impact focused companies, whether it's through accelerators or other places that I've met them, I think the common theme is they've really tried to make sure that they've defined what impact means to them and what their vision and mission is for that impact, and then gone to work to actually develop a business model that is driven by revenue, obviously, because they recognize that if they cannot make revenue, if they cannot sell this product or service, they're not going to be able to make the impact. Ensuring that those things are really tied together. We've seen it in the bigger companies, obviously, in the B Corp movement for sure. We see many companies that are demonstrating every year that you can be successful, that you can be a resilient business, that you can sometimes even perform better than the other businesses because you are committing to many sustainability and social and governance commitments in your business that actually make you just a better business. Because all of these pieces work in tandem together. It makes you think of companies like Patagonia and Warby Parker and all these big companies that really committed and continue to be committed to people and planet as part of their business model, not like as a nice to have, but these things are very intimately connected and are intimately connected to their success as well.
It's interesting because when I think of Patagonia, I think back to this question of scale and can you really have impact? Like, did I really make a huge difference when I was working on this tiny headband business out of Bolivia? What did I do? Well, I wasn't able to help that many women. I for sure helped one. And I know she repaid her loan way faster than she initially thought she was going to because of the business opportunity that we created together. But it wasn't a huge amount of product that she was sewing. She was one person. We really didn't grow it enough to really think through manufacturing at any given time, but it was a way for me to think about scale. And then years later, I'm working on this land-based salmon farm out of Miami. And this farm was essentially mimicking the natural environment with a goal to conserve the ocean while producing commercially scalable, high quality Atlantic salmon. And the reason why we needed that scale was because in order to compete with the in ocean farms and get to all those retailers and to get that price point down of such a high quality food product, we needed quantity. And once we started to try to create quantity is where the business sometimes ran into challenges, because to mimic the natural environment and to do something that's never been done before is very difficult, and it will inevitably fail. And that's where you need the founders to just keep going at what got them started in the first place, which was the connection to the social impact, the mission, the thing that mattered the most to them. And in this case, that founder, it was saving the oceans, like his love for the sea. And if we continued to farm the way we were farming all around the globe, he was seeing that as something that would change a landscape that was so important, not just to like everyone's way of life, but to him. And I feel like scale, impact, sustainability, often I ask myself this question, is it worth it if it's not big? Is it worth it if what you're actually doing isn't really changing the mark? I don't know what the answer is. I want to say, yes, of course it's worth it. But sometimes it feels like, especially if you're running that business and, you know, your bottom line isn't producing and you have a responsibility to produce, that maybe it's not. Like, this work is hard. Running a business on its own is hard, but like trying to run a business as well as make a difference, whether it's to the environment or to a social group or community, is even harder.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for sure. And that's the story of like just building a business, right? I mean, you just break things as you grow and as you scale. It's inevitable because there's such a shift between like when you have a team of 10 versus 100 versus 1,000, right? There's just different, even just operational systems that you need to have in your business for that to just function. And then layer, of course, impact into that as a key driver of success. And there's just more complexity, and complexity always creates chaos. And so there's just more thinking to be had about how to do this and execute it well, and how to think about impact and measure that impact that actually makes sense for your unique perspective. I think one of the things too around that is, you know, whether it's a small amount of impact or large scale impact, not everybody can be like the unicorns, the billion-dollar businesses. Just like not everybody is an entrepreneur. Ecosystems only work because there's multiple different actors and, you know, different players and different entities and different types of capital flowing into it. When we talk about an ecosystem that's like an innovation ecosystem, I mean, the same thing is to be said about a natural ecosystem. All of these different plants and trees and animals, we need all of those things to have a vibrant, healthy ecosystem. And in order for impact to be scalable, you need an ecosystem of it. You can't just have one player doing it all. You need multiple people driving towards change. And some of the work that I do with companies and funds is thinking through this process of like theory of change and like, what is the change that we actually want to see in this world? And one of the best simple message out of that tool is that you envision an impact in a state of the world that is better than where we are now because you've solved this problem. But the reality is you're just contributing to solving this problem, because likely there are other people and other entities and other organizations and communities working towards trying to solve that problem. So always think about, we're all contributing to something bigger than us. And when we actually change to that perspective, we recognize that, you know, we don't all need to be that unicorn. There's a role for everybody in this ecosystem to contribute to change and impact. And whether you're a small entrepreneur that has a small business, or whether you're an entrepreneur that's really trying to scale your business to be that unicorn, to be that billion-dollar impact business, or whether you're a large multinational actually that's trying to now weave this into your DNA and fundamentally change the way that you look at business and do business for the better. I believe that like everybody's got a role to play in that ecosystem. And that's sort of the message, is like, how do we get everybody activated to actually think, oh, I can contribute something here. Even if it's large or small, it doesn't matter, but I'm contributing.
Yeah. And that's really why I'm excited for this show. And I think it's a matter it is, because we're going to bring in people that are going to be all about the future of sustainability in the world of business. And we're going to allow a place and a time to just hear about where they're at in their journey. And it's going to start to paint this picture of what it means to innovate, what it means to create something that is both positive for the world at large and positive from a profitability standpoint. And I feel like that conversation is going to be one that I could hear over and over and over and again, especially if we're hearing from different perspectives.
For sure. And it's a juicy conversation. There's lots of different opinions and perspectives on it, and so many different companies and entrepreneurs and investors and leaders and innovators, which I get really excited about, right? And out of that, we can really like tease out what we're seeing in terms of trends and research and, you know, the nuances even between the US and Canada and other geographies around the world, because there are differences, and also dive into some of the challenges that exist here to actually move the dial on impact in our world. So, you know, I'm excited about our future conversations, and hopefully to the audience, if you're excited as we are about, you know, the future of sustainability and impact and business, we want to make sure that you subscribe to Ideas for Impact and join us on this fun journey and exploration. And we'd also love to hear from you, our listeners, on topics or individuals that you want us to cover or interview. And we're looking forward to many, many more conversations. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this very first episode, and stay tuned. Let's disrupt the world together.